History isn't what you think it is. It's stranger, funnier, and far more unbelievable than the stories you heard in school. Get ready for 101 ridiculous, shocking, and jaw-dropping facts. Peter the Great wanted to drag Russia into the modern European world of the 1700s. One of his strangest reforms was a tax on beards. Nobles had to shave clean or pay a fee just to keep their facial hair. Those who paid carried a special coin stamped with a beard, proving they'd paid the beard tax. Imagine being fined for looking too rugged. Peter made fashion into law. Eating sins for a living. Picture this. A person kneels at a coffin with a piece of bread and a cup of ale laid across the dead body. They consume the humble meal, quietly absorbing the sins of the deceased so their soul may rest. This was the grim role of the sin eater in parts of Britain and Wales. Centuries ago, this ritual was performed for pennies, yet it was believed to ensure a cleansing of the dead soul. For their trouble, the sin eater became an outcast. Families would pay him, then drive him away with insults, as if his new burden made him unclean. The last recorded sin eater, Richard Munslow, died on April 23, 1906, at the age of 73, thus bringing the practice to a close in history. Interestingly, unlike the typical poor and marginalized sin eater, Munslow was a respected farmer from Shropshire. Humans have always invented ways to cheat death's judgment. Would you eat bread for someone else's sins? Probably not, unless you're really hungry. Hatshepsut was Egypt's most powerful female pharaoh, ruling in the 15th century BCE. To be taken seriously, she adopted the symbols of male kingship. Her statues show her with broad shoulders, the clothing of a man, and even a false beard. This disguise allowed her to maintain authority in a male-dominated world, leading Egypt into wealth and stability. Her reign was one of prosperity, filled with temples, trade, and monuments. She proved you didn't need a Y chromosome to wear the crown, just a really good fake beard. In 1917, Montana saw one of the strangest arrests in American history. A man sitting quietly in a courtroom smiled during the proceedings. The judge didn't find it amusing and called it contempt of court. Without warning, the man was arrested on the spot for the crime of smiling. It shows just how strict and humorless justice could be in the early 20th century. Imagine getting jailed today just for cracking a grin. Half of us would be locked up instantly. Once upon a time, pink was the tough guy color. In Europe, centuries ago, pink wasn't cute. It was a shade of red, tied to blood, courage, and strength. Perfect for young boys expected to grow into warriors. Blue, on the other hand, was soft, calm, and pure, often linked to the Virgin Mary, which made it a girl's color in many societies. This flipped in the mid-20th century. Mamie Eisenhower, First Lady of the United States, wore pink so often that Mamie Pink became a sensation. Advertisers and marketers smelled profit, branding pink for girls and blue for boys. By the 1950s, the reversal was cemented in pop culture. A tradition? No. A clever marketing trick that stuck. Funny thing is, colors never had gender. We gave them one. Ever wonder what this tiny pocket on your jeans is for? Most people call it the fifth pocket, but that's historically incorrect. Let's rewind to 1873, the birth of Levi's jeans. The original design had just 4 pockets, 2 in the front, 1 on the back, and this tiny one. So what we now call the fifth pocket was actually the fourth. The true fifth pocket, the second back pocket, wasn't added until 1901. Its official name was the watch pocket or fob pocket. A fob was a fancy chain or ribbon used to secure a pocket watch. During World War II, Levi Strauss even removed the tiny metal rivets from the pocket. This was to conserve precious metal for the war effort. The rivets were added back after the war, a small detail in the grand tapestry of history. Today, its original purpose is long gone, but this tiny pocket has found a new life, a home for everything from coins and guitar picks to lighters and even wireless earbuds. So the fifth pocket on your jeans isn't just a quirky design choice. It's a time capsule from the 1800s. The Robbery That Fooled Tokyo, December 10th, 1968. Tokyo. 4 bank employees carried 294 million yen in cash, about $6 million today, in the trunk of a Nissan Cedric. Suddenly, a man dressed as a policeman pulled them over. He claimed their car was rigged with a bomb, just like one that supposedly hit their manager's house. Smoke erupted under the vehicle. Panicked, the guards bolted. The officer slid behind the wheel, drove off, and vanished with the cash. No guns, no violence, just smoke, mirrors, and nerves of steel. It became Japan's largest heist and sparked the biggest manhunt in Japanese history. Millions of fingerprints checked, thousands of suspects interrogated, yet no arrest, no suspect, no money recovered. The perfect crime. Sometimes Hollywood scripts are inspired by reality, or maybe the other way around. In 1975, U.S. Senate hearings peeled back the curtain on CIA secrets, and one revelation stunned the public. A modified pistol that fired poison darts. The darts carried shellfish toxin, could cause a heart attack, and left behind only a tiny red dot, almost impossible to trace. The weapon, dubbed the heart attack gun, was meant to make an assassination look like a natural death. The CIA admitted to developing bizarre tools and poisons, but never confirmed using this one in the field. It became one of the most chilling symbols of Cold War espionage. When James Bond movies feel less dramatic than reality, you know the spy game got weird. In 1944, sailors on the USS North Carolina rescued a tiny kitten from the sea. They named him George, short for General Electric, and he became their mascot. The crew even gave him a Navy health record filled with comic notes. It listed conditions like worries hell out of everyone and hollers like hell. George had a Liberty card, free run of the decks, and endless affection. Through the long months of war, he was more than a pet. He was family. From stray kitten to wartime legend, George always landed on his feet. In 1783, the Montgolfier brothers launched the world's first hot air balloon in France. But they didn't risk humans on the maiden flight. Instead, the pioneers strapped in a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. The odd trio soared for 8 minutes before landing safely, making history as aviation's first passengers. The successful flight paved the way for humans to follow soon after. Imagine being the rooster explaining to other birds that you flew before the Wright brothers. In 1975, Harold Davison decided to make history in Seward, Nebraska. He didn't just bury a box. He built the world's largest time capsule, a 45-ton concrete vault packed with more than 5,000 artifacts. Initially, earning a Guinness World Record for the largest time capsule. After losing the title in 1983, he added a pyramid on top to reclaim the record. Inside, everything from everyday letters and photos to a brand new 1975 Chevrolet Vega and a Kawasaki motorcycle. The vault stayed sealed for 50 years, waiting for its grand reveal. On June 26, 2025, the first cracks opened. By July 4th, America's birthday, the capsule came alive. The buried Chevrolet Vega was surprisingly well preserved after 50 years underground, with its paint still vivid. After a tune-up, the car was driven in the Seward 4th of July parade, completing its journey from the showroom floor to the open road. Artifacts returned to families. History unboxed. Imagine a buried fortune in Virginia worth millions, locked away by codes no one can solve. The Beal Ciphers, printed in an 1885 pamphlet, promised gold, silver, and jewels hidden in Bedford County. One code was cracked using the U.S. Declaration of Independence. It revealed a staggering list of treasures, but the other two, still unsolved. For over a century, treasure hunters have searched, scholars have debated, and skeptics have called it a scam. Is it a real treasure or just a brilliant hoax to sell pamphlets? The mystery endures. In a world obsessed with smartphones, one humble device still reigns supreme. The Nokia 1100 remains the best-selling mobile phone in history, with over 250 million units sold worldwide. Released in 2003, it was built like a tank, survived drops, dust, and even monsoon rain. Its battery could last nearly 2 weeks, something today's phones can only dream of. No camera, no apps, no Wi-Fi, just pure reliability. For millions, it was their first connection to the digital world, a symbol of an era before touchscreens ruled. Even today, collectors hunt for it, and in some markets, it became a cult classic. Sometimes, simplicity wins. The first official coin of the United States wasn't just money, it was a message. In 1787, Benjamin Franklin designed the Fugio cent, also called the Franklin cent. On one side, it carried the Latin word fugio, meaning I fly, paired with a sundial, a warning that time slips away fast. And Franklin's famous motto, mind your business. On the reverse, it displayed 13 linked rings, representing the original colonies, with the bold statement, "We are one." The meaning of the Franklin motto, mind your business, is not gossip, but literally focus on your work and industry. This early motto clashed with the later, in God we trust, showing how Franklin's secular, practical values shaped the young nation. It was only worth a cent, but its symbolism was priceless. Time flies, so mind your business. Gary Dahl wasn't looking for fame. He was sitting in a bar in 1975, listening to friends complain about their pets. That's when it hit him. The perfect pet isn't alive at all. It's a rock. No food, no walks, no mess, and best of all, it never dies. Dahl turned the joke into reality. He convinced friends to invest, bought smooth rocks off Mexican beaches for less than a penny each, and packaged them in cardboard boxes with air holes and straw, like real pets. He called them pet rocks. The toy debuted at a San Francisco trade show in August 1975. Within weeks, orders exploded. By Christmas, the craze peaked, and by the time sales dropped in 1976, Dahl had sold nearly 1.5 million pet rocks at just under $4 each, pocketing 95 cents profit per rock. He became a millionaire selling stones you could pick up for free. But the story didn't die with the fad. In 2022, toy company Super Impulse revived the pet rock. In South Korea, they caught on as stress relievers and meditation tools. Even K-pop idols like 17 and Enhypen proudly showed theirs online. Hollywood jumped in too. A 24 released a googly-eyed Pet Rock tie-in for the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. It came with straw bedding, instructions, and a movie-themed box. Pop culture kept the joke alive. On Sesame Street, Zoe's pet rock, Rocco, famously drove Elmo crazy. In Minions: The Rise of Gru, Otto trades away a powerful stone for a pet rock, sparking an entire subplot. Funko even released a pop figure of Otto clutching his new pet. Video games joined the fun. Nintendo launched a pet rock game, Magic. The Gathering Arena added one named Dwayne, and NASA gave the trend a cosmic twist. In 2022, Perseverance rover on Mars picked up a tiny stone in its wheel. It traveled with the rover for 439 days, over 6 miles, 9.7 kilometers, before scientists admitted the truth. Mars had its first pet rock. Later, the rover even adopted a second one, also named Dwayne. What started as a bar joke became a cultural legend, a $1 million fad. In 1802, President Thomas Jefferson received a massive 1,235-pound wheel of cheese. It was delivered to the White House by a group of grateful farmers from the town of Cheshire, Massachusetts, to honor his commitment to religious liberty and the separation of church and state. The cheese was so massive that it was nicknamed the Mammoth Cheese. The cheese, which bore the motto, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." It was made from the milk of 900 cows and was presented to Jefferson on New Year's Day, 1802, at the White House. But here's the twist. Its creation caused controversy. Federalist newspapers mocked it as a disgusting monument of Yankee pride, while Jefferson supporters treated it like holy relics, even carving slices as keepsakes. The cheese lingered in the White House for years, where slices were served on special occasions until the cheese spoiled. Winter 1984, Chukchi Peninsula, Russia. Imagine 3,000 beluga whales trapped beneath ice 12 feet, 4 meters, thick, gasping through tiny holes. Their escape route to the ocean was blocked, and starvation loomed. Locals tried to help, but the ice was merciless. Finally, the Soviets sent in the icebreaker Moskva. But the terrified whales refused to follow the thunderous ship. Then came an unlikely solution: music. Over loudspeakers, the crew blasted pop, folk, and even classical symphonies. It was classical music that worked. The belugas responded, gliding behind the ship like a living orchestra of the Arctic. The rescue lasted weeks, costing about $80,000, but in the end, roughly 2,000 whales were freed. Walter Summerford's life reads like a curse. In 1918, during World War I, he was struck by lightning while riding through a Belgian field and was paralyzed from the waist down. He somehow recovered, only to be struck again, and again. 3 times in one lifetime, each bolt finds him like fate. But the story didn't end with his death. 4 years later, lightning struck once more, this time blasting his gravestone. It's as if nature itself refused to let him rest. Imagine reading a book that eerily predicts the greatest maritime disaster of all time. In 1898, American writer Morgan Robertson published Futility, a novella about an unsinkable luxury liner called the Titan. 14 years later, the Titanic set sail, and the story became terrifyingly real. Both ships were nearly the same size. Both were deemed unsinkable. Both struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic in April, and both sank with catastrophic loss of life, because neither carried enough lifeboats. When the Titanic went down, Robertson's forgotten tale was republished as The Wreck of the Titan. Coincidence? Prophecy? or just a sailor who knew the risks too well. In 1813, a French woman named Émilie Saget was born in Dijon. She worked as a school teacher, but her career was haunted by a mystery. No matter where she went, students whispered the same thing. She was in two places at once. In 1845, at a boarding school in Latvia, girls swore they saw Emily teaching, and at the same moment, her ghostly double was across the room, mimicking her movements. Some even saw two reflections of her in a mirror. The most chilling event? 42 students saw Emily picking flowers in the garden while simultaneously sitting in a classroom chair. Emily herself never saw the apparition, only felt weak and drained when it appeared. Fear spread, parents pulled their daughters out, and schools dismissed her, 19 times in total. She vanished into obscurity after moving to Russia. If you ever think your boss works two jobs at once, Emily might have beaten them to it. Britain's Spaghetti Harvest, April 1st, 1957. The BBC aired one of the most legendary April Fool's pranks of all time. On television, viewers saw Swiss farmers harvesting spaghetti strands from trees like fruit dangling on branches. The serious voice of veteran broadcaster Richard Dimbleby made it convincing, even to the broadcasting agency's own director. Sir Ian Jacob, who searched for books on spaghetti farming. At a time when most Britons only knew pasta from canned goods, hundreds called in asking how to grow their own spaghetti tree. The BBC's cheeky reply? Place a sprig of spaghetti in tomato sauce and hope for the best. Proof that even the stiff upper lip can curl into a grin. Before electricity and refrigeration, humans pulled off culinary magic to keep food from spoiling. In Persia, people built towering yakhchals, dome-shaped ice houses that stored frozen water in desert heat. In Europe and America, people relied on deep cellars, ice boxes filled with blocks carved from lakes, and salted meats. In hot climates, fermentation and drying became survival art forms, turning milk into cheese, cabbage into sauerkraut, grapes into wine, and fish into stockfish that lasted for months. These methods weren't just survival tricks, they built entire cuisines. So yes, long before your fridge hummed in the kitchen, humanity had already mastered the science of cool. And you thought meal prepping was hard. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains of Kentucky lived the Fugate family, famous not for wealth or power, but for their skin. For generations, many were born with skin that appeared blue, as if the sky itself had marked them. The cause was genetic methemoglobinemia, a rare condition that reduces the blood's ability to carry oxygen. In the isolated hills, intermarriage kept the gene alive, painting the family in shades of blue for nearly 200 years. Doctors were stunned. Despite their unusual color, most Fugates lived normal lives. A treatment called methylene blue could temporarily restore natural skin tone, but the family remained a legend of American medical history. In Kentucky, the phrase "feeling blue" was a lot more literal. In 1877, a 14-year-old British girl named Rosa Matilda Richter stepped into a circus cannon and blasted her way into history. Performing under the stage name Zazel, she became the world's first human cannonball. The cannon wasn't powered by gunpowder, but by a spring-loaded mechanism that hurled her through the air. Still, the deafening bang convinced audiences they were witnessing a missile launch. She soared above the crowd, landing in a net as the audience roared. Zazel became a star, but the danger was real. Later in her career, she suffered serious injuries. Her daring act launched an enduring circus tradition that still amazes today. In 2021, divers off the Croatian island of Korčula uncovered something extraordinary. a 7,000-year-old stone-paved road hidden beneath the Adriatic Sea. Built around 4,900 BC, it connected an ancient settlement, now submerged. The road is 13 feet, 4 meters wide, about the size of a traffic lane, made of carefully arranged stone slabs. Alongside it, archaeologists found pottery shards and stone tools, revealing a vibrant community that thrived long before Rome existed. This discovery rewrote history, showing that organized infrastructure predates Roman roads by nearly 5,000 years. Turns out traffic jams may be older than civilization itself. In 1942, the FBI's fingerprint records room looked less like a lab and more like a massive library. Thousands of clerks filled endless rows of cabinets, filing fingerprint cards from soldiers, federal workers, and suspects. Using the Henry classification system, employees sorted prints by ridge patterns, a process that could take hours or even days for a single match. World War II made the workload explode as millions of servicemen were deployed. At its peak, the FBI employed thousands just to shuffle and classify fingerprints. This system laid the foundation for today's computerized fingerprint IDs. Imagine working in a place where the phrase "file your nails" was taken way too literally. In 1992, Columbia Pictures refreshed its iconic logo, the robed woman holding a torch. Artist Michael Dace painted the new image, using a 28-year-old graphic designer named Jenny Joseph as his model. Joseph had never modeled before and never did again. Yet her likeness became immortal, appearing at the start of blockbuster films around the world. She didn't chase fame, but for a moment, she was the face of Hollywood's beacon of light. Talk about stealing the spotlight. The man who refused to patent the sun. In 1955, Jonas Salk announced his polio vaccine, a discovery that would save millions from paralysis and death. When asked who held the patent, he famously said, "There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?" His choice not to pursue profit meant the vaccine spread quickly, wiping out epidemics and nearly eradicating polio worldwide. Salk didn't just make history in medicine. He became a symbol of science serving humanity first. Imagine today's pharma execs hearing that line. They'd probably faint. The universal recycling symbol, 3 chasing arrows, was created in 1970 by Gary Anderson, a 23-year-old college student. His simple yet brilliant design won a contest held for the first Earth Day, originally to mark recycled paper. The symbol spread like wildfire, becoming a global icon for sustainability. Today, it's stamped on bins, bottles, and packaging across every continent. Anderson received only a small prize, but his design defined an environmental movement. Not bad for homework that turned into a planet-wide logo. On May 18, 1980, Washington's Mount St. Helens erupted with the force of 500 atomic bombs. Before the blast, the volcano stood over 9,600 feet, 2,925 meters. It's a perfect cone, earning it the nickname America's Mount Fuji. The explosion tore away 1,300 feet, 400 meters, of the summit, leaving a vast crater. A lateral blast flattened 230 square miles, 600 square kilometers of forests. Ash spread across 11 states. 57 people died, and billions of dollars in damage reshaped the region forever. It remains the deadliest eruption in U.S. history. Nature's reminder that mountains don't just stand still, they blow their tops. Ever tapped a table and muttered, "Knock on wood"? That superstition is older than most civilizations we study. Ancient Celts and pagans believed trees were alive with spirits, even gods. By touching or knocking on wood, you weren't just making noise, You were calling for protection or keeping evil away. Some believed it silenced jealous spirits listening in. The ritual spread through Europe, crossed oceans, and today millions still do it without thinking. A simple knock, carrying thousands of years of human fear and hope. Imagine walking through a cemetery in Belgium and seeing history's cruel coincidence. Private John Parr, the first British soldier killed in World War I, lies buried across from Private George Ellison, the last British soldier killed just 90 minutes before the armistice. One fell in August 1914, the other in November 1918. Their graves facing each other in Saint-Symphorien Military Cemetery silently book in 4 years of carnage. The war began and ended with two young men staring at each other forever. Nike's famous swoosh wasn't born in a billion-dollar studio. It came from a college student. In 1971, Carolyn Davidson, a graphic design student, was paid just $35 to create a logo symbolizing the wing of the Greek goddess Nike. Co-founder Phil Knight wasn't even impressed at first, but the symbol grew into one of the most powerful brands in history. In 1983, Nike made it right, gifting Davidson a diamond ring with the logo engraved and shares of company stock. Today, those shares are worth millions. From $35 to an empire, not a bad return on investment. On July 4, 1984, Boston residents looked up and saw the impossible. A Brontosaurus flying over the city. A 34-foot, 10-meter replica weighing nearly 1,000 pounds, 450 kilograms, was carried by helicopter to the Boston Museum of Science as a publicity stunt. It wasn't the first time dinosaurs drew crowds. At the 1964 World's Fair, Sinclair Oil unveiled 9 massive fiberglass dinosaurs, floated down the Hudson River before the exhibit. Created by sculptor Louis Paul Jonas, they stunned onlookers and cemented America's obsession with prehistoric giants. Nothing says Happy Independence Day like an airborne dinosaur. During the Great Depression and World War II, American families struggled to clothe their children. Enter creativity. Women turned flour and feed sacks into dresses, shirts, and curtains. Seeing an opportunity, manufacturers began printing sacks with floral designs and bright patterns, so families could sew garments that looked stylish. Brands like Kansas Wheat and Gingham Girl promoted feed sack fashion, turning packaging into fabric. By the 1940s, this wasn't just thrift. It was a cultural phenomenon. Entire wardrobes came from humble grain bags. Imagine today's designer labels trying to sell you a limited edition flour sack dress. President Lyndon B. Johnson loved a good prank, and his amphicar was his weapon of choice. At his Texas ranch in the 1960s, he'd drive guests toward a lake, shouting, "The brakes don't work," as the car plunged into the water. Panic turned to shock when the car floated, powered by rear propellers. The amphicar, made in West Germany from 1961 to 1968, could hit 70 miles per hour on land and about 7 miles per hour on water. Johnson used it to terrify dignitaries and delight himself. Who needs Air Force One when you've got Scareforce Amphicar? In 1926, Nikola Tesla gave an interview where he described a vest pocket device that would allow people to talk instantly across the world, see one another, and even watch live events like sports games. He imagined a global wireless system, what we now know as the Internet, long before it existed. His vision of portable, interconnected devices mirrors the modern smartphone almost perfectly. Tesla didn't just predict electricity grids and radio waves. He basically predicted FaceTime. Dr. Joseph N. Jackson, one of America's most prominent black inventors, reshaped television technology. In the 1970s and 1990s, he developed devices like the programmable television controller and the telecommander, designed to give parents control over what children watched. His work also laid the foundation for the V-chip, a technology that blocks inappropriate content. Beyond TV, Jackson patented devices for fertility prediction and aircraft tracking systems. He turned everyday frustration into innovation, proving invention isn't just about gadgets. It's about empowerment. The ancient Egyptians built one of history's most fascinating calendars. It had 365 days, 12 months of 30 days, plus 5 extra epigomenal days tacked on at year's end. But there was no leap year. That meant the calendar slipped by 1 day every 4 years, cycling through the entire solar year every 1,460 years, a full Sothic cycle. The months borrowed names from the lunar calendar, and both systems ran side by side. Julius Caesar later borrowed heavily from Egypt when reforming Rome's calendar into what eventually became today's modern system. Turns out, even 4,000 years ago, people were already late because of the calendar. In 18th century Russia, one woman gave birth an astonishing 27 times. She was the first wife of Fyodor Vasilyev, a peasant from Shuya. Records list 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets, and 4 sets of quadruplets. That makes 69 children from one mother, the most ever recorded. A monastery report from 1782 confirmed the births, noting almost all survived infancy. Fyodor later fathered 18 more children with his second wife. In total, he had 87 children, enough to fill a village. Machu Picchu, the lost city in the clouds. High in the Andes of Peru lays Machu Picchu, the lost city in the clouds, a spectacular 15th century Inca citadel perched nearly 8,000 feet high in the Peruvian Andes. It showcases extraordinary Inca engineering, including mortarless stone walls and agricultural terraces, built during the reign of Emperor Pachacuti. The city was abandoned and forgotten for centuries after the Spanish conquest, hidden by the jungle. Rediscovered in 1911 by Hiram Bingham, it remains a mystery. Was it a sacred sanctuary, royal retreat, or astronomical hub? Today, this UNESCO World Heritage Site symbolizes the incredible brilliance and resilience of the Inca civilization. Imagine hiding an entire city for centuries. In 1745, Benjamin Franklin wrote unusual advice to a young friend. The letter was titled Advice on the Choice of a Mistress. Franklin suggested older women were better companions. He argued they were more experienced, kinder, and more grateful. He also noted it avoided the guilt of seducing a virgin. The letter was shared privately, showing Franklin's blunt and pragmatic side. Michelangelo was born in 1475 in Florence. Apprenticed at 13, he entered the Medici circle and quickly rose to fame. By his 20s, he sculpted the Pietà and the monumental David. His peers called him Il Divino, the Divine One. Between 1508 and 1512, he painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling. The creation of Adam became one of the most famous artworks in history. Later, he designed parts of St. Peter's Basilica, leaving a mark on Rome forever. The ancient Persians had a striking method for making decisions. They debated serious matters once while drunk. They reconsidered them again the next day while sober. If both choices matched, the decision stood. If not, the idea was discarded. It was their way of balancing impulse with reason. A stalagmite in Mexico preserved the story of the Maya collapse. Scientists tracked rainfall from 871 to 1021 CE through oxygen isotopes. They found repeated droughts, including one lasting 13 years. Crops failed, temples were abandoned, and dynasties crumbled. Even advanced reservoirs couldn't withstand a decade without rain. Deforestation and conflict worsened the crisis, sealing the empire's decline. On September 26, 1983, Soviet systems reported 5 U.S. missiles incoming. The alarms demanded immediate retaliation. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov refused to follow protocol. He reasoned that a real strike would involve hundreds of missiles, not 5. Ground radar confirmed no launches. The warning was caused by sunlight reflecting off clouds. Petrov's choice may have prevented nuclear war. For centuries, the story went, slaves dragged massive stones under lash and fear. Archaeology has flipped that narrative. Digging into Giza and surrounding sites, researchers found purpose-built villages, barracks, bakeries, workshops, even a hospital. All infrastructure for a skilled workforce, not slave chains. The laborers were Egyptians, conscripted from the farms, recruited in rotation, not enslaved foreigners. They ate prime cuts of meat. They received medical care. They were respected enough that some were buried in tombs near the pyramids. Inside the pyramids, subtle red ochre graffiti names their crews. Names like the Friends of Khufu or White Crown of Khnum Khufu. Each gang carved their identity before the blocks were set. And thanks to the Diary of Merer, a 4,500-year-old logbook, we now know that crews ferried 30 blocks, 2 to 3 tons each, every 10 days from quarries to Giza. Modern estimates suggest approximately 20,000 to 30,000 skilled Egyptian workers built the Great Pyramid over approximately 25 to 30 years, working out of civic pride and duty, not chains. In 1925, Karam Chand married Kartari in Punjab, India. Their marriage lasted 90 years and 291 days. They later moved to the United Kingdom. Together, they raised 8 children and 27 grandchildren. Their partnership spanned nearly a century of history. It remains the longest marriage ever recorded. Before 1922, diabetes was almost always fatal. At the University of Toronto, doctors tested insulin for the first time. They gave it to children dying from diabetic ketoacidosis. The results were immediate. Patients revived within hours. Mortality dropped from over 90% to less than 1%. Insulin turned diabetes into a manageable condition. It remains one of medicine's greatest breakthroughs. Long before apps and swipes, people searched for love in newspapers. The first known personal ad appeared in England on July 19, 1695. By 1710, all 53 of London's major papers published matrimonial notices. America's earliest ad appeared in Boston in 1759. These ads worked like anonymous dating profiles, with the paper acting as a matchmaker. Writers described appearance, wealth, religion, and expectations for a spouse. By the 1800s, some ads got hundreds of replies, and top papers charged for premium placement. Dating apps didn't invent romance. They just gave it a touchscreen. Wilmer McLean wanted peace. In 1861, the First Battle of Bull Run erupted on his farm in Virginia. Cannonballs shattered his fences, soldiers trampled his fields. To escape the war, he moved his family hundreds of miles away to Appomattox Courthouse. But history had other plans. In 1865, General Lee surrendered to General Grant inside McLean's new home. The Civil War had started in his front yard and ended in his front parlor. Sometimes you can run from history, but you can't hide. Benjamin Franklin thought the bald eagle was a terrible choice for America's symbol. He called it lazy, dishonest, and a scavenger. Instead, Franklin argued for the turkey, which he called more courageous and respectable. Imagine carving the national bird at Thanksgiving, proud and patriotic. Thankfully, we stuck with the eagle, because roasting turkeys for Freedom Day might feel awkward. London, December 30th, 1952. A double-decker bus crosses Tower Bridge. Without warning, the roadway begins to rise. Driver Albert Gunter realizes the bridge is opening beneath him. With no time to brake, he slams the accelerator. The bus launches, clears the gap, and lands safely on the other side. All 20 passengers survived, though Albert broke his leg. His reward for saving lives? 10 pounds and 1 day off work. Heroism clearly wasn't valued at the same rate as bus fare. Tokyo Airport, 1954. A passenger arrives with a passport from Torred. He insists it's a European nation between France and Spain. Customs officers detain him in a hotel under guard. By morning, the man and his documents vanish without a trace. Some say it was a clever scam. Others believe he slipped back into a parallel world. Either way, he became the man who checked in but never checked out. The Green Children of Woolpit. In 12th century England, two strange children appeared in the village of Woolpit. Their skin was green and their language was unknown. They refused all food except raw beans. Over time, the boy died, but the girl adapted and lost her green hue. She later claimed they came from a twilight land with no sun. Whether myth, malnutrition, or mystery, they remain one of medieval England's strangest tales. In 1828, a teenage boy appeared in Nuremberg, barely able to speak or walk. He claimed to have grown up in total isolation. Rumors spread that he was a lost noble, hidden from birth. For years, he fascinated Europe with his strange story. Then in 1833, he was stabbed under mysterious circumstances. No one ever proved who he was or why he was killed. From nobody to maybe somebody, Casper remained history's biggest question mark. On December 5, 1872, sailors found the Mary Celeste drifting in the Atlantic. The ship was intact, with cargo, food, and belongings untouched. But the crew had vanished into thin air. Theories ranged from piracy and mutiny to seaquakes and supernatural forces. No bodies, no final message, no clear explanation. To this day, the Mary Celeste sails through history as the ocean's greatest ghost ship. In September 1770, the skies erupted with auroras so strong they lit up Asia. The northern lights stretched far beyond the poles, reaching latitudes near the equator. For 9 nights straight, the heavens glowed green and red. Travelers wrote of reading newspapers by aurora light. It was one of the longest and brightest aurora events ever recorded. Imagine looking up at the sky every night for a week and seeing neon curtains. A samurai could have faxed Lincoln. The samurai era in Japan ended in 1868. The telegraph, a forerunner to fax technology, was patented in 1843. Abraham Lincoln lived until 1865. That means, in theory, a samurai could have faxed a message to Lincoln. History never staged this meeting, but the timeline made it possible. A warrior with a top knot and a president with a stovepipe hat. What a missed connection. P.T. Barnum staged one of the most unforgettable publicity stunts in New York City's history. in 1884. Panic still lingers after a deadly stampede on the brand-new Brooklyn Bridge. Whispers spread. Could the bridge collapse under its own weight? Enter P.T. Barnum, the greatest showman alive. He doesn't bring engineers or speeches. He brings 21 elephants, including the legendary Jumbo, and 17 camels. Step by step, they march across the East River. Thousands hold their breath, but the bridge doesn't budge. In one daring stunt, Barnum silenced fear, restored pride, and gave New York a show for the ages. The sight of elephants and camels crossing the East River became an iconic moment, blending entertainment, engineering triumph, and city pride into one unforgettable scene. In 1133, the skies over England turned black in broad daylight. Chroniclers described it as the darkness of doom, and panic spread quickly. To the medieval mind, it looked like the end of the world had arrived. In reality, it was a total solar eclipse, one of nature's rarest shows. The eclipse terrified kings and peasants alike, as omens of disaster were feared. Medieval England thought they saw Armageddon, when really it was just the moon photobombing the sun. In 1327, Edward II of England met one of the most bizarre deaths in history. He was allegedly murdered with a red-hot poker, chosen to leave no visible wounds. It was a method so cruel it entered legend, shocking even hardened medieval minds. Edward's enemies wanted him gone, but didn't want a martyr's body to examine. The result was a gruesome tale that has echoed for centuries. Who knew medieval England could invent methods of execution that sound like horror movie scripts? Pigeon-Guided Missiles. In World War II, the U.S. turned to pigeons, not for messages but for missiles. Psychologist B.F. Skinner trained them to peck at a ship's picture. Every peck shifted the missile's fins, steering it toward its target. In tests, the pigeons were shockingly accurate, but radar killed the project before it ever saw battle. The Titanic wasn't the only tragedy of her kind. Her sister ship, the Britannic, struck a mine in 1916 and sank. Among the passengers was Violet Jessup, a nurse already known as the Queen of Shipwrecks. She had survived the Titanic in 1912 and even an earlier crash aboard the Olympic. When the Britannic went down, she survived yet again. 3 disasters, 1 survivor. If Violet booked a cruise today, you'd probably want a refund. In ancient Teotihuacan, Mexico, dogs held a sacred role. Archaeologists discovered ceremonial graves filled with their remains. The people believed dogs guided human souls into the afterlife. They weren't just pets, but spiritual companions with cosmic duties. Burials with dogs show how deeply woven they were into society's beliefs. Forget man's best friend. In Teotihuacan, dogs were your eternal travel guides. In 1250, French knight John of Brienne crossed more than a battlefield. Through marriage, he entered the Muslim royal family of Damascus. For a time, he ruled as Sultan, a Christian knight in a Muslim court. It was an extraordinary collision of East and West in one man's life. Diplomacy, ambition, and survival blurred all cultural boundaries. From crusader to sultan, talk about climbing the career ladder in unexpected ways. In 1918, Parisians thought German planes were bombing the city. Explosions rocked the capital, shells falling seemingly out of nowhere. But there were no aircraft overhead, no Zeppelins in sight. The blast came from the Paris gun, this Germany's first long-range World War I superweapon. Firing from 75 miles away, measured 112 feet long, and took 80 men to operate. This first long-range superweapon reached beyond the horizon. Imagine sipping coffee in Paris and being shelled by a gun you couldn't even see. Although it caused significant fear and propaganda value for the Germans, the gun was militarily ineffective due to its inaccuracy and the high rate of barrel wear, with the Germans ultimately destroying the weapon and its schematics after the war. During America's Prohibition, alcohol was outlawed, but medicine wasn't. Doctors found a legal loophole and started prescribing whiskey as treatment. Patients lined up with prescriptions in hand, and pharmacies filled them with bottles of liquor. A cure? Maybe not. A business miracle? Absolutely. In 1600, Tori Mototada faced overwhelming odds at Fushimi Castle. With only 1,800 men, he defended against 40,000 attackers. They fought to the last, holding the fortress as long as possible. Their sacrifice bought time for Tokugawa Ieyasu to rally his forces. That time led to victory at Sekigahara and the unification of Japan. One samurai's doomed stand helped decide a nation. Now that's a heroic last act. In 1940, over 300,000 Allied soldiers were trapped in France. German forces closed in, and escape looked impossible. The British Navy launched a desperate rescue across the Channel. Civilian fishing boats and yachts joined the mission. Against all odds, most of the army made it home. When fishing boats save an army, you know history has a flair for drama. King Richard the Lionheart earned his name on the battlefield, but legends pushed it even further. Chroniclers claimed he fought lions with his bare hands during the Crusades. True or not, the tales cemented his reputation as a fearless warrior king. The image of Richard wrestling lions made him larger than life in medieval eyes. When you're called Lionheart, you've got to live up to it somehow. In 1325, the cities of Modena and Bologna fought a war over a wooden bucket. Modenese soldiers had stolen it from a well in Bologna. The theft escalated into a battle that left thousands dead. Modena won and proudly kept the bucket as a trophy. It's still displayed today, proof that people once killed each other over a bucket. R. Norris Williams didn't just escape the Titanic, he turned tragedy into triumph. As icy Atlantic waters claimed over 1,500 lives, Williams clung to survival, enduring frostbite so severe that doctors wanted to amputate his legs. He refused. 2 years later, he was back on the court, winning the U.S. National Championships in 1914, then again in 1916. He captained Davis Cup teams, earned Olympic gold, and in 1957 secured a spot in the International Tennis Hall of Fame. Off the court, he thrived as an investment banker and preserved history through his work with historical societies. From near death in the North Atlantic to global tennis glory, Williams proved that survival isn't just about living, it's about refusing to give up. In 1086, William the Conqueror ordered a survey of all England. Every village, farm, and even livestock were recorded. It became known as the Domesday Book, the first great national census. It gave William total control over taxes and land. England was conquered once by the sword and once again by ink. In 1514, King Manuel of Portugal gave Pope Leo X a white elephant. The Pope named it Hanno and adored it. Crowds filled the streets of Rome to watch the elephant parade. Hanno became the Vatican's most famous pet. Forget the Pope mobile. This Pope preferred pachyderms. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand's driver took a wrong turn. The car stopped directly in front of Gavrilo Princip, an assassin. Princip fired 2 shots, killing the Archduke and his wife. That single mistake sparked World War I. Talk about the worst wrong turn in history. The city buried twice. Pompeii was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, but an earthquake in 62 AD had already wrecked the city. Rebuilding was still underway when the volcano erupted. The city never had a chance to recover. When disaster strikes twice, survival isn't on the list. Jean-Baptiste Colbert started as a barber in the French court. Through ambition and skill, he gained royal trust. He rose to become Louis XIV's powerful finance minister. Colbert built the system that made France rich and the king mighty. From trimming beards to trimming budgets, that's a close shave with history. At the 1912 Stockholm Olympics, the marathon turned deadly. Temperatures hit 32 degrees Celsius, or about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Runners collapsed from the heat and only half finished. One athlete was even chased off course by wild dogs. The scariest part of the marathon wasn't the distance, but the dogs. When the Panama Canal opened in 1914, it did more than link trade routes. It permanently mixed the waters of the Pacific and Atlantic, ecosystems that had been separated for millions of years. Ships carried species between oceans, and the canal itself became a watery highway for invasive creatures. Some species thrived, others were wiped out, reshaping marine life across continents. It wasn't just an engineering marvel. It was an ecological experiment with no reset button. And the fish? Let's just say they didn't get to vote on the merger. World War I wasn't just a war of men, it was a war of animals. Nearly 8 million horses perished hauling supplies, charging into gunfire, and dying beside soldiers in the mud. In 1916, 650 servicemen gathered for a haunting tribute. They arranged their bodies into the shape of a giant horse, visible only from above. It wasn't a monument of stone, but of flesh and discipline, a living memorial to the animals that gave everything without ever understanding why. One formation, one photograph, and a reminder that war devoured more than just human lives. John Quincy Adams, America's 6th president, had one of the strangest White House pets ever. He kept a live crocodile in the East Room, a gift from the Marquis de Lafayette. Visitors were both thrilled and terrified, not knowing if they'd be greeted by the president or his reptile. Adams reportedly enjoyed showing it off, letting it slither through the halls of power. It may not have passed modern security protocols, but it certainly made a statement. Forget Secret Service. Imagine the crocodile guarding the Oval Office. While such an unusual pet would be surprising, the narrative lacks verification in the president's diaries, Lafayette's records, or contemporary accounts from his allies or political rivals. In the 17th century Netherlands, tulips became more valuable than gold. Rare bulbs sold for more than houses, fortunes were traded for flowers, and an entire economy bloomed overnight. By 1637, prices crashed spectacularly, ruining investors and sparking one of the first recorded financial bubbles in history. It was called Tulip Mania, where a single bulb could cost 10 times a skilled worker's annual wage. The craze revealed how obsession and greed can inflate markets beyond reason. At least when today's markets crash, you can't eat your losses in a salad. Picture this. The Mediterranean waves crash outside. Roman nobles recline at a lavish feast, and then the room begins to warp, not from wine, but from dinner itself. The Salema porgy, a modest-looking fish, hides a mind-bending secret. Eat it, and you're thrown into vivid hallucinations that can last up to 36 hours. Romans served it deliberately, turning banquets into psychedelic spectacles. Forget togas and gladiators. This was ancient Rome's version of a rave. Imagine explaining that to your doctor. Along Ireland's north coast lies the Giant's Causeway, a stretch of over 40,000 basalt columns. Formed by volcanic eruptions 50 million years ago, they look so perfectly hexagonal that they seem carved by hand. Irish legend tells a different story. That giant Fionn McCumhall built them as a bridge to Scotland. When a Scottish giant threatened him, Fionn tricked him by disguising himself as a baby. The rival giant fled in terror, tearing up the bridge behind him. Turns out geology tells one story, but mythology always steals the spotlight. During World War II, Lisbon became the ultimate espionage hotspot. Neutral Portugal allowed both Allied and Axis spies to operate freely. Cafes buzzed with secret deals, coded messages, and double agents whispering over coffee. Everyone from Nazi intelligence to British MI6 used the city as their chessboard. Even Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, passed through Lisbon during the war. It was a place where secrets were traded faster than sugar packets, and the waiters probably knew more than the spies. In 1016, Danish King Canute conquered England after years of Viking raids. He didn't just stop there. He built a North Sea empire stretching across England, Denmark, and Norway. His rule brought surprising stability, blending Viking strength with English governance. Even went down in legend for ordering the tide to halt, to show his courtiers the limits of kingly power. Far from just a raider, he became one of Europe's most powerful monarchs. Proof that sometimes the invader doesn't just pillage, he takes the throne and keeps it. In the 1920s, Turin built a factory like no other, the Lingato, a 5-story Fiat plant crowned with a rooftop racetrack. Cars rolled off the assembly line, spiraled up the ramps, and thundered onto the roof, hitting speeds of 56 miles per hour, about 90 kilometers per hour, high above the city. It was Europe's most advanced factory, a symbol of speed and power perched on concrete. When production ended in 1982, architect Renzo Piano gave it a second life. The factory became a cultural hub, with theaters, shops, and an art museum, but the rooftop track remained. Today, visitors can still walk where test drivers once raced above the skyline, a surreal blend of history and horsepower. Florence Nightingale wasn't just the founder of modern nursing. She was also a statistician. During the Crimean War, she collected data proving that poor sanitation killed more soldiers than bullets. To persuade officials, she used pie charts and graphs, a visual shock in the 1850s. Her diagrams revealed that disease, not combat, was the real enemy. By pushing reforms, she saved countless lives and transformed military hospitals. She literally weaponized math, making charts deadlier to generals than cannon fire. In 1588, with the Spanish Armada threatening invasion, Queen Elizabeth I faced her troops at Tilbury. Dressed in armor, she addressed them with fiery words. "I have the body of a weak and feeble woman," she declared, "but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Her defiance inspired soldiers as England prepared to repel Spain's mighty fleet. The Armada was defeated, and Elizabeth's legend was cemented in history. When your pep talk makes men forget they're outnumbered, you've mastered leadership. The emperor who made a horse a priest. Roman Emperor Caligula adored his horse, Incitatus. He gave it a marble stable, a jeweled collar, and servants to attend it. Ancient writers claimed he planned to make the horse a senator or priest. For Caligula, power meant pushing absurdity to the limit. When a horse gets better treatment than half the empire, you know politics has gone off the rails. Venice stands on millions of wooden piles driven deep into the mud and clay of a lagoon. These foundations, laid nearly 1,000 years ago, support grand palaces, cathedrals, and narrow canals. The wood didn't rot because it's submerged in oxygen-poor water, which actually petrified and hardened it over centuries. That's why the city still floats today, even as it battles rising seas. A city that should have sunk long ago still thrives. Talk about stubborn foundations. Deep inside Rabat's Medina, one man has turned his tiny shop into a temple of knowledge. Since 1967, bookseller Muhammad Aziz has sat among endless stacks, reading for up to 12 hours a day. In his lifetime, he has devoured more than 5,000 books in Arabic, French, Spanish, and English. When asked why he leaves his books outside where anyone could steal them, he gave a legendary reply. Those who can't read don't steal books. Those who can read aren't thieves. For over half a century, Aziz has proven that true wealth isn't gold or silver, it's pages and ink. In 1969, Honduras and El Salvador clashed in what became known as the Soccer War. Tensions had been building over immigration and land disputes, but football was the spark. After a series of heated World Cup qualifying matches, violence erupted across borders. Within weeks, tanks rolled and soldiers fought a brief but deadly war. When politics mix with football, sometimes the ball isn't the only thing kicked. On Easter Island, the massive Moai statues puzzled explorers for centuries. Each one weighs up to 82 tons and stands over 30 feet, 9 meters, tall. Locals explained they weren't dragged, they walked. Using ropes, teams rocked the statues side to side, inching them forward like giant waddling figures. The Moai didn't just represent ancestors, they literally danced across the island. Alexander the Great built an empire stretching from Greece to India in just over a decade. He fought more than 20 major battles and countless smaller skirmishes. Through strategy, speed, and sheer audacity, he never lost a single one. From the Persian Empire to Egypt, his army crushed every opponent. He died at just 32 undefeated, history's ultimate winning streak. In the 1600s, London's River Thames froze so hard that it turned into a carnival ground. Known as Frost Fairs, the frozen river hosted markets, pubs, wrestling matches, and even horse races. Tents lined the ice as people roasted meat and sold souvenirs right on the river. It became so solid that entire streets were built across the frozen water. Londoners didn't just survive the freeze, they threw a party on it. The king who spoke 22 languages. Mithridates VI of Pontus ruled in the 1st century BCE and was famed for his cunning. He supposedly spoke the language of every single person in his vast empire. That meant at least 22 different languages, no translators required. It made him nearly impossible to deceive in diplomacy or court. Forget Google Translate. The Tower of London is infamous for executions and prisoners, but it also housed a royal menagerie. Kings kept lions, tigers, elephants, and even a polar bear that fished in the River Thames. The animals were gifts from foreign rulers, showing off power and wealth. For centuries, the tower was as much a zoo as it was a fortress. Imagine being locked up next to a lion. You'd never complain about noisy neighbors again. In the 1840s, David Crockett ran for office with a bizarre campaign slogan. He told voters plainly, "I'll do nothing." Instead of losing, he won in a landslide. Sometimes honesty really is the best policy. Well, the truth is, the anecdote about Davy Crockett running for office in the 1840s with the slogan, "I'll do nothing," is a popular urban legend with several historical inaccuracies. In reality, the famous frontiersman and politician died in 1836, years before the supposed election. Davy Crockett was a 19th century American frontiersman, soldier, and politician. He served multiple terms representing Tennessee in the U.S. House of Representatives between 1827 and 1835. His political career was anything but passive. It was defined by his outspoken and principled stances. Crockett died at the Battle of the Alamo in March 1836, solidifying his legendary status. The "I'll do nothing" story is a later fabrication. It likely emerged as a simplified, humorous anecdote about an unconventional and honest politician, perhaps inspired by Crockett's well-known political independence. The reality of his political career, marked by principled opposition to a powerful president, is arguably more compelling. The man who was both dwarf and giant. Adam Rayner was a unique individual, classified as both a dwarf and a giant. He is the only person in recorded history to experience both conditions. Born in Austria in 1899, he was only 118 centimeters tall, 3 feet 10 inches, at age 18, classified as a dwarf. He was even rejected from military service in World War I for being too small and weak. Then something unbelievable happened. A tumor on his pituitary gland triggered gigantism, and his body wouldn't stop growing. His rapid growth led to severe health problems, including spinal curvature, making him bedridden for the rest of his life. By his 30s, he reached 218 centimeters, 7 feet 2 inches. Before his death, he measured 234 centimeters, 7 feet 8 inches. He died at 51, the only recorded person in history to live as both a dwarf and a giant. And that was just a glimpse into the wildest corners of our past. History isn't dusty. It's alive, bizarre, and packed with secrets waiting to be uncovered. Which fact blew your mind the most? Tell me in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories from history's hidden pages. Until next time, remember the truth is always stranger than the legend.